The camera crews were setting up. Producers whispered into earpieces, and makeup artists rushed from station to station. But in the center of the storm sat Clint Eastwood, calm as a stone in a river. Dear listeners, before we move forward, please subscribe my channel to hit 1,000 figure. It was supposed to be a routine late-night interview. The legendary actor-director had agreed to appear on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert to promote his latest film, a war drama with themes of sacrifice, honor, and quiet faith. Nothing controversial, nothing loud, until the request came in. Just moments before Clint was to be escorted to the stage, a young assistant producer, clearly nervous, entered the green room holding a clipboard. "Mr. Eastwood," she said, hesitating, "Stephen would like to request, that you avoid bringing up your religious views during the segment." Clint raised an eyebrow but didn't speak. "He thinks," she continued, "it might steer the conversation into uncomfortable territory for the audience. Just, keep things light, entertaining." The room fell completely silent. A publicist shuffled uneasily. The makeup girl stepped back. Clint finally set down his coffee. He looked up slowly and spoke in that familiar gravelly voice. "So, let me get this straight. I can talk about war, about killing, about death, but not about belief." The assistant froze. He stood, calm and deliberate. "You tell Colbert something from me," he said, putting on his coat. "If a man's not free to speak from his soul, then he's just reading someone else's script." Then he headed straight for the studio exit, 5 minutes before air. The building, buzzing only seconds before, now felt frozen in time. As Clint Eastwood's boots echoed down the hallway toward the exit, the atmosphere behind the stage collapsed into chaos. Stephen Colbert's production assistant stood frozen for a moment, holding the clipboard like it was radioactive. Then, as if jolted awake, she bolted toward the control room, her voice cracking in panic. "He's walking out. Eastwood's leaving the building." Inside the studio, the audience had no idea what was happening. The crowd had been warmed up. The theme music was cued, and the host was just steps away from making his grand entrance. But behind the heavy curtains, producers were swearing under their breath. Stephen Colbert himself emerged from his dressing room, adjusting his tie. Completely unaware of the storm that had just broken loose. "Is Clint mic'd up?" he asked, casually, sipping from a branded coffee mug. A senior producer rushed to him, face pale. "He's gone. He didn't take well to the, script note." Stephen blinked. "What note?" "The part where we suggested he avoid talking about his faith." Colbert's expression changed. His usual late-night smirk vanished. He placed the mug down slowly. "We suggested, or we told." He felt it was a demand. Said if he couldn't speak from the soul, he wouldn't speak at all. Colbert didn't respond immediately. The tension now wasn't just about a missed interview, it was about public image. A last-minute cancellation with someone like Clint Eastwood wasn't just a PR hiccup. It was a disaster waiting to go viral. He turned sharply to his head writer. "Can we pivot the monologue? Mention it lightly, like a joke? Get ahead of it?" But it was too late. On Twitter, a junior crew member had already tweeted, "Clint Eastwood just walked off set after being told not to talk about his faith." This is real. Within minutes, hashtags like "Yolku's Let Clint Speak" and "Oo's Eastwood Walkout" were climbing the trending charts. And Clint? He was already in the back seat of a black sedan, staring quietly out the window as New York City flickered past. His silence now louder than anything that would have been said on stage. The next morning, the media was ablaze. Every major outlet, from Fox to CNN, Variety to TMZ, had picked up the story. Clint Eastwood walks off Colbert show after being asked to hide his faith. Speculation flooded the airwaves. Was it a publicity stunt? A miscommunication? A sign of Hollywood's growing discomfort with personal convictions? But Clint Eastwood wasn't interested in feeding gossip. He didn't do interviews just to clean up a mess. He spoke when there was something worth saying. And this time, there was. At exactly 9 a.m., Clint's official team posted a short, unfiltered video to his verified account. No dramatic music, no PR polish. Just Clint, sitting on the front porch of his ranch, bathed in morning light, wearing a weathered leather jacket and that same unreadable expression he'd worn since Unforgiven. He leaned forward slightly and looked into the camera. Some folks asked me to leave a part of myself backstage. Said it might make people uncomfortable. Well, I'm 94 years old, and I've seen a lot of uncomfortable things. War, injustice, division. But I've never once believed a man ought to apologize for what centers him. He paused. His eyes were tired but unshaken. Faith doesn't need to be flashy. It doesn't need applause. But it's not something you tuck away because someone with a microphone tells you to. That was it. No rant, no drama, just truth, spoken with the calm thunder of a man who had nothing left to prove. The video went viral in minutes, not because it was shocking, but because it was rare, honest, unapologetic. Within hours, thousands began sharing their own stories, soldiers, single parents, truckers, even young actors, all posting under one banner. Number Faith is not a prop. Meanwhile, over at CBS headquarters, the Late Show team held an emergency meeting. Stephen Colbert sat at the head of the table, his usual sarcastic armor showing cracks. He stared at the paused frame of Clint's video on the screen. No one spoke. For once, the sharpest voice in late-night comedy didn't know what to say. By the end of the day, Clint Eastwood wasn't just trending. He had become the center of a cultural firestorm. Morning radio shows argued over him. Opinion hosts debated his actions as if they were national policy. Commentators on both sides scrambled to define what had just happened. Was it defiance, dignity, or disruption? But outside the newsrooms and green rooms, something deeper was unfolding. In diners across the Midwest, in barbershops, in truck cabs hauling freight across the heartland, people were watching that 90-second video over and over again. Not because it was flashy, but because it was true. A quiet, stubborn truth that had been missing from public voices for far too long. Clint Eastwood, a man who had built his legacy on playing characters who said little and did much, had once again let his silence speak louder than any applause line ever could. In a small town in Nebraska, a Vietnam vet named Harold played the video for his grandson. This man, he said, tapping the screen, he remembers what honor used to mean. In a Baptist church in Alabama, a pastor opened his Sunday sermon with Clint's line, "Faith doesn't need to be flashy. It doesn't need applause." Even Hollywood felt the tremor. Other actors began speaking up. Denzel Washington reposted Clint's message with a single word: respect. Mark Wahlberg wrote, "We shouldn't have to hide what centers us." Even some who often disagreed with Eastwood politically found themselves admiring his stance. Meanwhile, The Late Show scrambled to recover. Producers floated the idea of inviting Clint back, this time without restrictions. But everyone in the room knew the answer. Clint didn't return. He didn't rehearse. He certainly didn't negotiate belief. Stephen Colbert, usually quick with a quip, closed that night's episode with an unexpected moment of reflection. He didn't mention Clint by name, but the subtext was clear. "Sometimes," he said softly, "we confuse entertainment with agreement. But maybe we should just listen." The audience clapped politely. But outside the studio, beyond the lights and cue cards, the real audience had already chosen sides, and more of them were siding with the man who walked away without raising his voice. A week had passed. Most Hollywood controversies fade faster than they arrive, replaced by scandals, premieres, or celebrity feuds. But this lingered, not because Clint Eastwood kept talking, but because he didn't. While news anchors begged for exclusive interviews and networks flooded his team with offers, Clint returned to doing what he loved, spending time on his ranch, editing a documentary quietly in post-production, and riding his horses at dawn. But something extraordinary happened. At the American Film Institute's Lifetime Legacy Gala in Los Angeles, an event Clint had turned down attending for years, a surprise envelope arrived. Inside was a simple handwritten note from Clint, read aloud by a close friend on stage before a room of elite Hollywood figures and rising filmmakers. The lights dimmed. Cameras rolled. Silence swept across the room as the message was read. "When I was younger, I thought success meant being heard. Now, I think it means knowing when to walk away, and still be heard anyway. Don't just act. Don't just direct. Don't just host. Stand for something. And when they ask you to hide it, smile kindly, and walk out the door. You'll be surprised how many follow." The room stood still for a moment. Then, an ovation, not polite, not performative. A standing wave of applause that went on for minutes. Even the most scripted faces showed real emotion. That night, across the country, Eastwood's message became more than a moment. It became a mirror. Students wrote about it in college essays. Pastors quoted him in sermons. Journalists referred to the incident as the Eastwood exit and the Late Show. Ratings dipped. Comments poured in, many questioning when the show had stopped being a place of ideas and started being a place of filters. But Clint, he didn't gloat. He didn't retaliate. He didn't tweet. Because real legends don't chase headlines. They write them and move on.